Thank you. Buyana. Chamai. Chamai is an Eskimo word meaning greetings in Yupik Eskimo. So Chamai, everyone. Chamai. Again, my name is Eleanor Roll. My Yupik name is Nunapik. It means the real land or the great land. And I would add flowing with milk and honey. And it is absolutely amazing, what to be asked to be a part of this time here, because this feels like a marker moment for Alaska. That's what it feels like to me in the spirit. So I am half Yupik Eskimo and I'm half white. I grew up in a very small Eskimo village. My first language was Yupik. English is my second language. And my dad was the first white man into our village. And my mom, of course, spoke Yupik only. And I don't know how they communicated. But they managed to have 7 kids, although I think my dad had more than that. And so I grew up, again, in the village, and I remember, and we grew up living off the land. I am a hunter. I am a fisher woman. I lived off the land. Don't let these fake nails fool you. And so we grew up, like I said, hunting, fishing, living off the land. At the time, there was no grocery store. And so our groceries were all out in the land, and we worked like men. Our first home was a cabin, no electricity, no running water, no furniture. And so I remember at about 7 years old, I had a pull towards the bigger world. I knew there was a bigger world out there. And we had this one Southern lady to come into our little tiny schoolhouse. And she said, "Now, no Yupik speaking, English only. Y'all understand?" I said, "Yuhtun kanchika." All the native kids put their heads on the desk, and I said, "Yuhtun kanchika." She said, "What did you say?" I said, "Yuhtun kanchika, I will speak in Yupik." And so she took and she slapped me across the face. I hit my head on the corner of the desk and got knocked out cold, and everybody thought I was dead. And so my dad carried me to our cabin, and I finally came to. And after that, something good came out of it. They fired her, and then some Yupik teachers were hired, and so we learned to put our language on paper. And so in 8th grade, at 12 years old, I had to decide where I was going to go to high school, because we didn't have a high school in the village. And of course, I believe being half, we were targets. Me and my siblings were targets to all kinds of abuse: mental, emotional, verbal, physical, sexual. And so I learned to fight at a very young age, and I became a very fast runner. And so in 8th grade, at 12 years old, I had to decide where I was going to go to high school. And so I had 3 choices. The first one was Dillingham, which was the hub town. And the second one was Chemawa in Oregon. And the third one was Mount Edgecombe in Sitka. And so I knew in my knower that I was supposed to go to Mount Edgecombe. And so at 12 years old, I said to my mom, "I'm going to Mount Edgecombe." And she said, "Well, if you go, I don't have any money to bring you back home." And I said, I made a vow to myself, I will never be a burden on anyone, especially to my mom, because by that time my dad had left and they got divorced, and in those days there was no food stamps. And so, and they needed to be divorced because of his dark side too. And so at 12 years old, I said, I will go, and you will never have to worry about me. I will never ask you for a penny. And I never did. And so I worked, I went to Mount Edgecombe, I got on a plane, I didn't even know how to check in. But I got on that plane and I went down to Sitka, and at that time, during those days, we were taught, but in a very underneath way. You can't speak, read, and write, and you can't speak in your language. You can't wear your native garb, and you certainly cannot eat your native food, even if it's sent to you from home. And I'm like, oh no. And so I learned how to read subliminal messages. Yes. And so I was there in Mount Edgecombe, and I learned to observe things and how systems are run, and my little mind was working. And so when I became president, we're like, okay, we are changing things. And so at that time, they wanted to close Mount Edgecombe down because it was a BIA school. And so that's Bureau of Indian Affairs. And so I got every student to write letters to our senators, our representatives, our native corporations. And by that time, they were sending me back and forth to Juneau. And some of you may not know this. I was being groomed to become what they would say the first Native woman governor of Alaska. And I was a lefty. And I was given a 4-year scholarship when I was in high school. I could have graduated early in high school, but I said, oh, no, I don't want to graduate. I don't want to go back to the village. What am I going to do in the village? And so I said, no, I want to stay in school. And they said, well, we'll go ahead and you can start college as a senior in high school. And so my first college course was political science, and I was on fire. I mean, I loved it. That was the path that that was chosen for me. And my mom said, you're gonna do it. You are gonna do it. You are gonna do it. I mean, it was drilled in me. And so, and in the summertime, of course, we got to go back home while I was attending Mount Edgecombe. I'd go back home and I would work 3 jobs because I had to fend for myself. So I worked at the cannery, I worked at the new Native hospital, and then I also worked part-time for our representatives, which they were all Democrats. And so they were grooming me. They would send me back and forth to Juneau. And so I worked as a page in Juneau, and we were on the train getting ready to go. And so I started college, loved it. They would put me into mock trials, training me to be a lawyer also. And that was like, I would literally almost get a high from that because I loved going in to fight. And so I've had to become a lover. So I started college in high school. I'd go back home to Dillingham to work, and then my first full year of college started, and my world came crashing down. And so my mom was dying of cancer, and she requested me back home. Out of 7 kids, I'm second to the youngest. And she asked me to go and take care of her. And so I went back to the village, no doctors, no nurses, and I slept next to her. And I was her doctor and her nurse. And I took care of her until the night of her death. And I knew the night she was going to pass. I've had this knowing since I was born of what's things. I won't go into that, but I went for a walk. For the first time that night, I went for a walk. And then somebody came, and while I went to my cousin's house, got in the house, and I sat. I was laying on the bed, just awake, and I felt this cool, warm, like a warm wind just blow right by me. And then my uncle came in and said, "Your mom has just passed." And I said, "I know." I went back down. Oh, before she passed, she started speaking into my life. And she started telling me in our Yupik language, "Agayutum atochikatchen, anchken atochikatchen, yakfakani ayachchikuten, manilu alaskami, agayutum tuknika pertuk." And she was telling me, she was seeing a vision of me that the Lord was going to begin to use my mouth. Now, I grew up Russian Orthodox. I didn't grow up knowing about the word. I never saw a Bible growing up. But at 7 years old, I was walking along our riverbank, and I said, I just said, "God, I know you're out there, God. I know there's a God out there." And I heard his audible voice, and as God is my witness, I heard his voice say, "One day you will know me." And I hung on to that throughout my life, throughout all of the abuse, all of the torture, all of the rejection and abandonment, and all of those things that I faced. And so I go back home, and on the day of her burial, I get on a plane. After she dies, the day of her burial, I get on a plane and I tried to go back to college. And I started losing my mind. And I tried committing suicide many times, and then I was sent back. I couldn't think anymore. So I was sent back. I tried to stay at my mom's house in the village, but I couldn't. There was too much violence going on. So I became homeless, and I was homeless in Dillingham in the middle of winter. And me and my older sister were staying together, and her daughter, and no heat, no electricity, and we were freezing and we were starving. And so along came a man riding on his white horse, and it was the wrong man. And he took me out of this situation, and I knew he was not for me. I knew it. But because I was in this situation, I married him. Even on the night of our wedding, I knew he was not for me. And even on the night of our wedding, he wasn't even with me. And so I ended up fleeing for my life to Anchorage. So when I fled for my life to Anchorage, it was indeed that, because I started plotting my escape. And so when he found out that I was plotting my escape, he took his rifle and put it up to my head. And I didn't know how to pray. I just knelt at the foot of my bed, and I just said, "God, receive my spirit." And he put the rifle to my head, and click, it didn't go off. But then when he put it up to the ceiling, it went off. And I fell forward because I thought I died. And so after that, I knew that I needed to go. And so I finally mustered up enough money to come to Anchorage. And so when I came to Anchorage, I'm determined my life and my son's life was going to be different. And I didn't know how to drive. I didn't know how to shop. I didn't know how to bank. I didn't know how to do any of that. But obviously I know now. And so I engaged with the man that I was truly in love with. He was my first love out of high school, but he lived here. And so we got back together again, and I was going through a divorce, but my ex-husband found me, and he told me how he was going to kill me, and he was very serious. But at that time, I started crying out to God, and I remembered God's word. I remembered when he spoke to me, and he said, "One day you will know me." And I said, "Okay, God, if you're really real, now is the time. Now is the time. You said when I was 7 years old, one day I would know you. Okay, you need to show up now. Otherwise, I could be dead any moment now." And so I was just walking outside, I felt like a lion on the inside. And I didn't know what to do. And I was just crying out to him and crying out to him. And then once I got done, I went inside the house and calmed down, and I was crying out to the Lord. I mean, when there's a threat for your life, you're going to cry out. and my ex-husband was very serious because he had tried it a couple times before, and so anyhow. We were invited to a small church, and they called it a revival meeting with Prophet so-and-so. And at that time, I didn't know what a church was. I didn't even know what a Bible looked like. And so 33 years ago, our nieces said, "Come, Auntie, to this revival meeting." And I said to my husband now, my boyfriend at the time, I said, "What in the world is a revival meeting? And what in the world," I use other words, "is a prophet?" He said, "It's just church, it's church." And I said, "Well, why don't you go ahead and take me?" He said, "Yes, I'll take you. You really need church. You really need God." And so we went in there, and I saw people praising and worshiping, and it was so foreign to me, because I grew up in Russian Orthodox. And so I said, "God, whatever all these crazy people have, I want it, and I want more of it." And he met with me supernaturally, and he transformed my life. He began to give me dreams and visions for my life, and not only for my life, but for Alaska. And then he, of course, I thought I was going to go by the way of politics. And then he began to train me in ministry, and I began to read that word and just had a desire for the word of God. I would stay up night after night after night reading the word of God, and at first I didn't know how to read the word. And my husband said, "Well, there's two parts. There's the Old Testament and there's the New Testament. And John 3:16. I said, "You mean to tell me you knew that all along and you never told me?" And so anyhow, so he would bring me to church, and God just began to download, his vision for my life. And I'm coming to a close here. And then one of the things that he just began to show me was that we would go into ministry together, and you know how you try to disqualify yourself. Well, gee, I can't speak very well, God. English is not my first language. And I'm a native woman from Alaska. I mean, who's going to listen to me? And it became stronger and stronger and stronger. And I just finally said, yes, yes, God. You have called me to be a minister. And my whole family disowned me at first. My village disowned me and said, you are not one of us. But now, 33 years later, I have led each and every one of my siblings to the Lord. Amen. I have led many of our people to the Lord. To God be the glory only. And God has blessed my husband and I with a ministry called Kingdom Alliance Network. It's not just for Native people, it's for all people, because all of us are in the kingdom. Black, yellow, purple, and white. We love all people. We love to train and equip people to be who God has created them to be. And God took this woman that was in a hopeless place and homelessness into Anchorage, the city of hope.
Yes, that's right.
And then from there, I mean, it's amazing. We've had many invitations, not only to Alaska, but the nation and even the nations. But this is my post. This is our post. And God has said, do your part well. And that's what we're endeavoring to do. And then he even decided to bless us with a couple Airbnbs called Golden View Retreat and the Eagle's Nest on the Kasilof. And he has blessed us exponentially. I mean, to God be the glory. So thank you so much, Leigh. And we are for you. We believe in you. And God bless you as you go forward.